Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutt of HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion for Monday the 19th of June, 2017. A lot to go over. Let's start off before we get into the two most interesting features of today's update with our tour of the sea surface temperatures and the anomalies and things like that. I'll try to go quickly to get to the stuff that most people are more interested in, but this is important. And this updated today, this is the departures from normal for the 19th of June. We see in the Pacific areas of blue, which are colder anomalies or below normal temperatures, intertwined and intermixed with the small areas, these blobs of oranges, and overall the state of the El Nino would be neutral. And for the hurricane season that we have in the Atlantic, that is generally what we would consider a positive signal, and not positive meaning it's good. It's just a enhancing signal. That's a better way to put it. An El Nino typically creates wind shear in the Atlantic basin that is not favorable for tropical waves to develop. And you see where this is related now. We do have a tropical wave developing here, came all the way off Africa, 92L, now referred to as potential tropical cyclone 2. Hopefully it'll get upgraded and just be called Tropical Storm Brett, just so we can get a name that people are more familiar with. We'll go over that more in just a moment, though. Notice, too, also off the coast of the west coast of North America here, much colder than average sea surface temperatures, especially in here. That is really, really incredible to see. And so we haven't had any hurricanes develop out in the eastern Pacific yet. All the activity has been very weak. In the meantime, the Atlantic basin here, the main development region, running above the long-term average, and up here off the Iberian Peninsula, cooled off just a little bit relative to what we have seen, but overall sea surface temperatures still running above normal across much of the deep tropics here in the Atlantic basin, and even the Gulf of Mexico filling in just a little bit more. It's not the whole thing. I'll show you. We're going to move into actual sea surface temperatures in a moment. Remember, these are departures from normal. And contributing to that, or in some cases not contributing, would be, especially on the positive side, or warmer than normal anomalies, would be the subsurface. And this is where we talk about our El Nino potential. And we see this large strip of positive anomalies here in the subsurface. At the top here, we're at the surface of the ocean along the equatorial Pacific, and at the bottom we're several hundred meters deep. And so you see there just isn't that much in the way of positive anomalies going on. In fact, below this line, you have another line of colder anomalies trying to develop. And, we're probably just going to be sitting at this warm, neutral side of the ENSO state, what we call the El Nino state. I don't see any changes. In fact, the vast parts of the western Pacific here still holding on very much at neutral. And any of these anomalies are very small. All this coloring here, we're only talking about 1/2 to a degree Celsius. Everything else, except in the eastern Pacific, is warmer, but it's small, very, very small. So no sign of El Nino anytime soon. That's the bottom line. All right, moving along here to the upper ocean heat content. And this is where the rubber meets the road, as they say, and this is becoming very important this time of year already. Upper ocean heat content is different than necessarily looking at just the skin of the ocean where the temperatures are that we're measuring, satellite-based temperatures, etc. This shows us how deep that warm water extends into the ocean, and the more upper ocean heat content you have, like you see here, especially in the Western Caribbean, the higher up on the scale we go. And this just has to do with how much energy is available if a hurricane or tropical storm or even a tropical wave is coming along and it's stirring up the ocean. It's just stirring up more and more warm water, especially in areas like this, where that, what we call TCHP, or tropical cyclone heat potential, there it is over there on the right, how far that extends down into the ocean. The Gulf of Mexico, for the most part, lagging in the few years in the recent past, but as I'm going to show you in a minute, it's still plenty warm. And you notice that the TCHP values are going up here off the southeast coast, and where our tropical wave is located right down here 92L / potential tropical cyclone 2. You can tell that's going to be fun, right? And I do mean that. That's, geez. It is a good idea, and we'll talk about that more in a minute, but it's just weird having to deal with that extra naming. But the TCHP values are warm enough down here that we're not talking about just warm surface water. So this is what this looks like now. This was updated yesterday. Wait till you see this in, let's say, another 60 days. Moving along to the Gulf of Mexico, and these are actual sea surface temperatures here, okay? We're not talking about anomalies or departures from normal. And so everywhere you look in the Gulf is 26 degrees Celsius, which is here, or higher. And 26 Celsius is roughly 80 degrees, 79.5, I guess, to be precise. And the rest of the Gulf in this green color all through here, 29 Celsius down in the Bay of Campeche. Actually, this is 28, this is 29. So it's warm, okay? It's 80, 81, 82. It's plenty warm. And so our developing system in this area is going to have plenty of warm water to take advantage of, even though it's not as warm as we have seen in recent years. So you'll see the effects. You might not have as an intense a setup, but this isn't the setup that we're looking for intense hurricanes anyway, and I'll explain what that means in a moment as well. All right, so looking off the east coast, water temperatures plenty warm along the southeast waters here, in the low to, in some cases in the Gulf Stream, getting towards mid-80s, close anyway. Off the Jersey shore, though, still looking at water temperatures at 19 and 20 degrees Celsius, a little bit warmer as you get along the Maryland and Delaware coast. We're talking about 67 to maybe 72 degrees, depending on where you are across this region. And I really like to show this because we're going to see over the coming weeks how this advances more and more to the north and everything starts filling in. And then that'll make a big difference when we get to the meat of the hurricane season as to whether or not something can survive as it would come around the corner, so to speak, and potentially, just potentially here, move up the east coast. You know, if you had something coming in more towards New England, how much warm water and how far north does it extend? In June, that's not an issue. So let's move along to what's happening. All right, so these are our players for today and beyond. Large and sprawling area of low pressure here, 93L, and you can see very much sheared for the most part, the western semicircle over here. And you can see these clouds, and we're going to zoom in a moment on the floater, showing you the low pressure area, but it's naked, okay? There's not any deep convection on the west side. And so if I was naming this, I would name it Tropical Storm Ugly, because it doesn't look like your classical storm. But that's not going to matter, and we'll get into that more in a minute. This, let's put aside the impacts to people for a second. You got to look at this and say, that's pretty cool looking. The way the wind is just ripping these storms off like feathers here, or cotton candy being pulled apart. But despite that, look at that band of convection trying to wrap in there. Oops, the arrow came back. If you've been seeing these lately, you know I hate that dreaded random arrow. The convection trying to wrap in around this center. Let's take a look at this on a close-up. And you don't see the clouds streaming away as much here that I was showing on the wider shot. But there you can see they're getting pulled away to the north up here. But the center of circulation is down here. And you've got this really impressive feeder band developing, trying to pull moisture in. And remember, I showed you the ocean heat content in here is high enough that this can do it. And it's moving along pretty fast, too, at about 25 miles per hour, embedded in those deep trade winds. But down here, you've got the coast of South America. And as this approaches that northeast coast of this continent, even though this is in the tropics, and you've got rainforest down here, this is still drier. It's land. So this will ingest some dry air, and that's why we're not seeing these big feeder bands coming off from the land. You just can't do that usually. Once they get over land, sometimes they'll develop a feeder band over water that comes in over land, but that's a different story for a different day. But you can see in here, it's trying to develop more convective activity near that center of circulation somewhere in this area. Recon on the way out there now, from what I understand, so we'll know a lot more. And then you folks here, look at Barbados. You're getting ready to get hit by this band that's trying to develop. And as you go farther to the west, these islands here from anywhere, Grenada, Trinidad, Tobago, and south and west of Barbados here, you know, this is what we talk about when we say don't focus on the exact center of circulation. Where's the center? Well, the center is down here, but it's still somewhat ill-defined, and it's not a hurricane. And so you've got these big bands of convection that are going to come through and probably lash all of the islands south of 15 degrees north. So it's going to take in a good chunk of the windward islands, especially the southern windwards. Then we're talking about potential impacts for Venezuela and on over towards the ABC Islands as this moves along. It's going to need to gain some latitude. That means get farther to the north, or it's going to just crash into South America, and it'll fall apart very quickly. We'll take a look at what the latest GFS model shows about that possibility in a moment. So you folks here, and we do have a few people that talk to us on social media, especially in the YouTube comments, from the Southeast Caribbean islands. Let us hear from you as this comes through, and we can talk about that in tomorrow's update. Moving on along to the Gulf of Mexico. Now here's what I was talking about. This, clearly you can see this turning motion in here, the low pressure area taking shape in the southern Gulf of Mexico, but all the heavy weather, and there is plenty of it. Nice band coming across there, another one up through here. You know, anybody out in this region, the oil industry, this is going to be a disruptive storm, but not your classic looking where you say, oh my, that is an impressive storm system on satellite. It doesn't have to be that way. This is going to be in disguise, so to speak. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's not going to have that typical tropical storm look. At least it doesn't have it now. But boy, the rain this is going to bring, I am really worried about the folks up here. We have a lot of friends, literally and on social media, across the central Gulf Coast, Louisiana, Texas, even into Mississippi. And I think this is going to be more of a Louisiana-Texas event overall. But that big fetch of moisture, already parts of it coming into Florida. And so here's the point. People say, where do you think it's going to go? Do any of the models bring it into Florida? Well, if we're talking about the low center coming up this way, no, that's not going to happen. If we're talking about the weather from the system coming up into Florida, yes, it's already happening. And will it get worse? Well, probably not. But areas towards maybe the western panhandle, Pensacola, Mobile, into Alabama there, and then Mississippi, and then on across the Louisiana and Texas coasts, the weather's just going to get worse with a strong onshore flow, southerly winds, piling up that shallow shelf water up there. Storm surge, that's exactly what that is. And heavy, heavy rain. We're going to examine this obviously even more tomorrow as this gets better developed potentially and talk about the impacts. But don't dismiss this as being overhyped or it doesn't look like a big deal, because 10 inches of rain in some locations that have already had too much rain, and you folks out there that have already dealt with stuff like this, like last year with that weird low pressure area that went across and just destroyed parts of Louisiana with epic flooding, you know all about it. You got to look at this and say, oh, that's a problem, and at least be ready for it in a mental state that it's coming my way. I need to be careful, change my travel plans if I have any. If I work far away from home, you know, you need to account for these kinds of things when it's raining 2 inches an hour. And that's a big problem. And if there's 40-mile-an-hour winds on top of it, that makes things even worse. You don't have to have a 100-mile-an-hour hurricane to have a truckload of problems. All right, so moving on along to upper-level winds in the Gulf of Mexico, our system trying to get under this anticyclonic flow, but it's kind of not winning very well because you've got this upper-level system over here, and that's sending upper-level winds pretty fast over the top of it, but more to the west for the most part. It's not quite over the whole thing, or it would just be shredded completely. So it's got some favorability on the east side, less so on the west side. So it's definitely struggling. Meanwhile, our system down here in the southwest Atlantic, almost into the Caribbean. Upper level winds still just enough favorable near it that they're getting ready to switch real soon out of the south, and that's going to start to inhibit development over the next 24 hours. The vorticity signature that I like to refer to, well, here it is. I mentioned yesterday. Let's see what happens with our system in the Gulf. It looks like a big appendage here, and you can see how elongated, and it's trying to focus over here, but it is increasing in the vorticity, and that shows that it is gradually getting better organized. In the meantime, there it is right there, a round ball of energy that is associated with the tropical system, the almost tropical storm. That's what that looks like. And so as the season goes on, if we get development coming out of Africa and a hurricane out here somewhere moving westward over time, watch how large that expanse will be of that ball of red, as I like to call it. That shows you that something is definitely well organized, has a lot of energy with it, a lot of spin in the atmosphere, instead of being sort of weak and what have you. And if you've seen these videos over the last few days, you've seen how this has evolved, and I think that's rather fascinating to be able to track that. All right, let's get on to the modeling here. Let me move this out of the way before I give the plot away, so to speak. So let's go back to the very beginning of the GFS. This is the 12Z run. And the initial map, right here, I want to show you the initial map. We see the vorticity 8,000 feet. 850 millibars, or about 5,000 feet in the atmosphere. There's our 93L in the Gulf, and here is possible, potential, whatever you want to call it, tropical cyclone 2 entering the frame on the southeast part. So let's put this into motion, minimize this for a second, and I'll show you, if I can get rid of everything. This is the next 4 days. We're going to go 96 hours into the future from this initial plot. So, a couple things to watch. This is our system here in the Gulf. Look how it tries to somewhat bundle that energy there at about the 24-hour time frame, between now and 24 hours. Meanwhile, this system here comes right across. Look how much latitude it gains. These animations, or this animation, will start over in just a moment. Remember, I'm only going out to 96 hours. You notice our Gulf system comes right up into central Louisiana. That would be a big rainmaker for sure. And then at the end of the run, it ends up somewhere over eastern Arkansas. Now let's go back and let's look at a couple of things. Here's our system coming right into Trinidad and Tobago by tomorrow morning. And then it starts to weaken as upper level winds are going to be screaming out of the south here. And that'll be moving across that, basically getting hit by crossfire. And it'll eventually dissipate there in the Caribbean Sea. But some remnant moisture may make its way towards Jamaica and the Caymans, perhaps, where you definitely don't need any more rainfall. One more time as this comes in, very important to keep an eye on this system. And you can see the vorticity, the energy in here stays intact right as it passes through, might even be tightening right there. So keep that in mind. This may still try to intensify even as it moves through Trinidad and Tobago and Grenada and that area. So you guys down there, don't take this lightly. It won't be the worst thing ever, but it's also not something to completely say, no big deal. I'm serious about that, and I think you folks down there understand that more than most people. One more time here on the loop, you see our system in the Gulf. You folks here, again, let me draw yellow, along the coast, wide area of impact from this. All this green is energy. And it doesn't necessarily mean rainfall, but you can bet it'll be raining underneath this over a large area. And you have got to be ready for that in terms of, like I said, adjusting travel plans, outdoor plans. If you're in a flood-prone area and you've had a lot of heavy rain, think about getting ready to move some valuables out of the way. This could be a big flood event, and I want you to take it seriously. That's the main impact from this. Secondary coastal issues with some storm surge, and then maybe some wind on top of that. And even the possibility of severe weather, tornadoes in some of these bands. It is what it is. Hey, I want to tell you about, I would be remiss in not doing my job if I didn't mention all of this information. It's great to watch it on YouTube, but if you're not around a computer or whatever, we do have an app, and that's what it looks like. That's the splash screen when you first start it. It's called Hurricane Impact. It's on the App Store. We do have an Android version, but it hasn't been updated in a couple of years. It's all about the funding, I'm being honest with you, and the funds are not there to keep the Android version, which sells far less overall than the iOS version, so you got to invest your money where the future is. And so we do have an Android version, but it's kind of broken. So if you get it, hey, it's a vote of confidence for our future that soon enough, hopefully we can put more funds into it and bring it up to where the iOS version is. Hey, I'm just being transparent here to let you know. But yeah, I'm really proud of this app. It's great because you've got everything aggregated and consolidated into one package. It's available in the App Store. All of these videos go in there. And then when we go out in the field, I'm going to tell you, and if you were here with us last year, especially for Hermine and Matthew, this app really shows itself when we go out for a landfall event with the live video, the live weather data, and the ability to post stuff to the app instantaneously. No other app out there. There are some great hurricane tracking apps, no doubt, but how many of them will actually take you into the field and show you what happens after all that tracking? We'll actually take you and show you how it all comes together, and that's all in the app. So iOS is the best version. It is in the Android Google Play. Check it out, Hurricane Impact. And we will be doing updates throughout the summer, and hopefully for Android too. Alrighty, well that's it from me for today. Before I go, I will tell you I am on Twitter, at HurricaneTrack. So follow along there. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, now's a good time to do so. And we really, it's not just me, and there's myself and the colleagues behind the scenes that you never see until we go in the field usually. We all appreciate the feedback. It's really wonderful, so keep that coming. Have a great rest of your Monday afternoon. If anything breaking news comes along, so to speak, like yesterday, I'll do another quick update. Thanks for sitting through this lengthy one. We had a lot to talk about, and because we're not television and have commercials or other shows to run up against, I can take as long as you'll listen. So I appreciate it. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I'll be back with you at least by tomorrow, if not before then.